that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of BreathTalks. And it is with absolute great pleasure that I'm speaking today with Debbie Unterman, who is a master alchemical hypnotherapist and trainer. She's been training since the 1980s. And in the early 1990s, she developed her own class on sexual abuse, and she is an expert at handling clients who have gone through sexual abuse. I've invited her today because of the recent incidences within the breathwork community of trust and consent with touch that is sexual in breathwork sessions. I mean, I wanted to start off first of all in remembering how when I first went to university in the orientation week, the vice chancellor stood up in front of all the first year students and said, "Men, 25% of the women in this room have been sexually abused." And we're talking 90% 17, 18-year-olds, you know, and it's even higher now. And then at the time, it was much less for men, but sexual abuse for men has increased dramatically. So Debbie, how did you get into this work?
Well, first, when you say it has increased dramatically, I would say the reports of it
the report
have increased dramatically, because I don't think it was ever any different. Just like we could say the oldest profession in the world, there would be no need for prostitution if there were not Johns. There were not men that wanted to pay to sleep with a woman. And look, children, you can do it for free. You don't have to pay. And I don't understand the sick mind that has this desire, but it seems to have been forever. I got into it actually because you can't help it. If you start working in the subconscious mind and doing intake interviews, people are going to tell you. But then you find out some people don't really know or understand. So what I realized I had to do when I first started teaching the course on healing, and back in those days, because now we kind of have childhood trauma covers the field. But I used to say, if you were sexually, verbally, physically abused or mistreated or abandoned, because abandonment is also very, very hard to heal. And then you start finding the statistics, like deaf children, girls and boys, like Tommy. I grew up listening to The Who. I had the album Tommy. You get the whole arc of why did he become deaf, dumb, and blind, and why did Uncle Ernie start wanting to fiddle about? Because he couldn't tell. It happened to him, probably, if you listen to the rock opera enough, because he saw his mother probably having an affair, or, and it made him psychologically lose all those senses. But you find out that the what is the term of, I don't want to go into the wrong term, of developmentally disabled communities, deaf communities, people that won't tell. It's extremely high. That's when you get into the 90%. So I also wanted to start teaching people that it doesn't have to be what I call P&V, if you can figure out what that means. It doesn't have to be that you were penetrated for you to have been abused, raped. your life changed in that moment. And then I started also hearing clients tell me about doctors that told them, like one, that's a pretty well annotated case, I'd say, because I was teaching at a massage school. I was teaching the body mind portion at a massage school. And I would do a demo on someone. And so it was a woman in class that everybody knew was really having trouble. She had had a heart issue.
Yeah.
The doctors told her, I mean, and this is so ridiculous because you have to trust your own intuition, that the fact that her father had read her journal when she was a child about her uncle, her father's brother, having abused her and then wanted to tell her it wasn't true, had nothing to do with her heart attack in her 20s or whatever she was at. How can doctors tell you that? So after the session I did in front of a whole class of people, and then I went to graduation, I swear people were coming up to me to tell me what a change there was in this woman. And when I looked at her, I didn't recognize her. One session.
Yeah.
So to be believed is really important too. And to understand that what happens is important.
I mean, I had a client who, very large, and this is, one of the consequences is the security fat around, and she burst into tears right in the interview stage of the session, and she just blurted it out. She said, this, 30 years she's held this in, and her husband didn't even know. And so exactly what you were saying about people not talking about it.
Yeah. And sometimes it is hard to recognize. I had similar to a woman that didn't even tell her husband for 30 years. This is a what you might call in America an old maid, somebody who never married. And she was just ready to retire from being a school teacher in New York City. And her niece or goddaughter knew me and bought her a session with me when she was able to talk about an uncle, a favorite uncle, that all her other sisters and brothers and cousins were jealous of her because he gave her the best presents. Like if you know F.A.O. Schwartz, the toy store in New York City, in Manhattan, it is famous. Like I think there's a movie called Toy Story or something, and that's where Tom Hanks dances on the piano. That's the store. Right. He would take her to that store to buy really expensive presents. So she thought because she was getting something from him, she shouldn't worry about what he was doing because she was accepting the gifts. But it gave her a life of no relationships.
Yeah.
And thinking it was all her fault.
Yeah. So these are the things that, we need to address when we're working with clients. Now, on a physiological level and neurological level, what happens with the trauma from particularly early abuse?
Right. Although I'm not even sure if it has to be early for this brain change to take place, but I want to give everybody a very easy story to remember forever. You can't unlearn it once you know it. It's a process that's called learned helplessness that happens, that makes you weaker and weaker. And I love this story about your chancellor at your university. I'm not sure what the point was in telling those boys. I hope it was,
okay, so during orientation week, there'd be a big toga party that was a drunken affair, and girls got raped every year. It's banned now, but yeah.
So the chancellor was trying to tell boys, leave the girls alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't take advantage.
And for the early 90s, that's really forward thinking for the vice chancellor to actually say, come on, men,
Okay, I'm in the middle of two thoughts, but I want to talk about the early 90s for a second, because the early 90s, when I was getting started doing these classes all over the world, it was really progressing well.
Mm.
People were believing it until, do you remember the False Memory Syndrome Society?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, this is kind of the fault of newspapers,
Mm.
journalists, because they wrote articles as
Yeah.
if they were doctoral, presentations, as if they were true. And journals were taking them in and publishing them. And it turns out they've been sued. It was one family. I think it was a judge that was the
Mm.
father. But what happened in the 90s, because everybody was going, oh my God, kids are getting sexually abused. Let's bring them to court. And the court systems, who has the power in the court systems? So the rich men
Mm-hmm.
that were the abusers found that with those people that were the False Memory Syndrome Society, or False Memory Society, FMS or something,
Mm-hmm.
that they could hire them for a lot of money and get off and start accusing. Can you imagine accusing their daughters of lying?
Yeah.
And that they were mistaken, which, okay, I'm going to go back a little further to the 1800s. I think it was 1800s with Freud. And
Mm.
he also began to realize with his patients that sat on his sofa, in Victorian days, they
Yeah.
could 7 days a week. The rich women came and laid on his sofa 7 days a week, every day. He heard all these stories. But who were the abusers? All the men
Mm.
who were his peers. So he's hearing the stories from their wives and children. And then the men started going, how dare you accuse me? So that's when,
Yeah.
do you know what he did? He changed his theory. Aha, these women just want to have the penis. This is penis envy. And that's how that started.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
So we're,
Yeah.
just when things could get good,
Mm.
rich men bring them down.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the brain now and
Mm-hmm.
what happens when you have a
Mm.
shock to the brain. So the human evolution of animals, of
Mm.
not just the human species, all species, for survival of the species and the individual, has to have a way to get out of danger. So there's the fight flight. If you can flee, if you
Yeah.
can fight. But what happens when you're held down? There's nothing you can do. You can't activate that system, the sympathetic system, to
Mm.
help you to get away. So it goes into the parasympathetic system and becomes the freeze, which has
Mm.
now been added. So it's becoming pretty ubiquitous now, that whereas we learned in biology, fight, flight, it's now fight, flight, freeze. And
Mm.
I don't know, Ciara, if you know that it has also gone into please and appease. It
Please
is
and
now
appease.
fight, flight, freeze, please, and appease.
Wow.
So the pleaser
Mm.
is now being thought of in therapy as a brain system
Yeah.
to please or appease, to be able to not be hurt. So in the
Yes.
same way that in the freeze, when you're held down and you
Mm.
can't get away, that's when you go into that dissociative state. You leave your
Yeah.
body and your body is stuck there
Yeah.
to put up with the offense. And then when it stops, your soul can come back into your body.
Mm.
But because of that, we create, once it's happened and you've learned to dissociate, the
Mm.
word is dissociate,
Mm-hmm.
pet peeve of mine. If people call it disassociate, that means leaving an association.
Yeah.
So when you dissociate from your body,
Mm-hmm.
and you've learned how to do that without what animals do. So now let's look at playing possum in the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
A possum pretends to be dead. It lays there, and the one that would eat it, or want to just play with it, goes, oh, dead meat, no fun, don't want to eat it, don't want to play with it anymore. Okay, let it go. And then it waits, then it comes back to life. Just like, and I like to go into this too, like a bird that hits a window, boom, falls down, looks dead. But what happens? It starts shaking its wings, shivering.
Yeah.
It gets up and flies. A deer, there are cases of people putting deers into their trucks. They think that it's roadkill. They go to untie it, and the deer does the same thing. It kicks, it shivers.
Yeah.
Yes, that is called the discharge.
Yeah. And actually, TRE has had a real comeback recently.
Yes. Yes, because we need to discharge the trauma. Because humans don't learn to discharge it. And this is where I'm going to go into the graphic detail that everybody will remember. So this is what scientists have done. They've done an experiment with what's called a burning bowl. A drowning bowl, not burning, drowning bowl. I've learned to be able to say this without crying and without apologizing, because it's just an experiment. So you know what they do when they're scientists, they'll play with anything. So they play with baby chicks. Okay, so they have 3 sets of baby chicks. One set, what they're going to do to they're going to poke them with a pencil when they put them in this bowl, and they're going to see what happens. So in one, they poke them with a pencil, they allow them to do their discharge.
Yeah.
Another one, they poke them with the pencil, or maybe the third one is that they don't even poke with the pencil. I can't remember what it is. The third one, they poke, and then they won't let them do the discharge. They poke them again. They poke them again. They poke them again. And then in this drowning bowl, they time how long does it take for them to drown. Okay.
Yeah.
So I hate it, but it's so visceral. You can't make this stuff up. So the ones that were not allowed to discharge, they go down first. The control group goes down next, and the ones that are allowed to do the discharge, they live the longest. Right. So that's where the learned helplessness, like if you are held down, and you could be held, like my brother was held down because he had dysentery. And he was a baby, 6 months old, and he kept trying to, get out. So they had to hold him down to keep. He's got the learned helplessness. Doesn't have to be rape, but when you're raped, you are held down. Yeah. And you learn the learned helplessness, and that makes you more vulnerable forever. And so there's another one of my pet peeves. It is not the fault of the one that lets it happen, because you can't help it. You have learned how to dissociate. You're out of your body. You've learned this learned helplessness. And when that occurs again, and you're not an empowered person who knows to say, fuck off, bug off, get off of me. I'm out of here, toga party, or maybe doesn't even go, but the ones that do, and then they get taken off into a room, they're out of their body. They've already gotten into this, and it's not a victim mindset. It is physiological, evolutionary, and that's what I need people to know, because women blame themselves, men blame women. False memory says they don't even know what happened. Judges don't believe it. They think it's a he said, she said. They need brain science. Yeah.
And this is what we'll go through in a session too. So, luckily we have a technique for handling abuse, sexual abuse in particular, and being able to discharge during the session is vitally important. Yeah.
And we can do it like you're saying that, what's it called? RE, that, where they make it.
TRE. Yeah.
That's a system. They can do it with 2,000 people in a room, and they get them
Yeah.
all shaking, because there are places in the world where they've been bombed and they need 2,000 people at a time to all
Yeah.
get out of it. We
Yeah.
can do it. It might spontaneously happen, or we can do it by active
Yeah.
empowerment techniques of pushing someone off of you, where we use a pillow
Yeah.
to imagine that someone on them, and we let them push to
Mhm.
get that activity, or maybe a bat and a pillow.
When I did my training in Santa Rosa, we did the psychodrama and set up the situation, because I mean, this happened to me when I was a child. And so when I was held down in that psychodrama and someone prodded me, this almighty energy came out of me, and I pushed like you wouldn't believe. And all the men in the room,
We're
they
all
saw it.
against you.
They were like holding the space, and they were like, wow. And they totally understood what happens to a person in this situation, and saw the discharge of energy. And it was incredible. Yeah. And so that's why it's really important to hold a safe space for people who might have been through these situations.
Okay.
Okay. So in the instance that has been happening within the breathwork community, I mean, it is without a doubt that a certain percentage of women that were subjected to this may have experienced, sexual abuse before as well. And, we can recreate situations in our lives, particularly with trauma that hasn't been dealt with.
Let's just put that a little differently. The universe will continue to create situations until we can heal it.
Yeah.
So don't put the onus on the person that's creating it. That, I really hate that. Why did you create this situation?
Yeah.
That's such bull.
Okay. All right. So
people are blamed too much for things.
Yes.
The wrong people are blamed. The wrong people are blamed. We need to put the blame where it belongs, on people who take advantage of other people.
One of the big issues with when this occurs is there's a power play going on. And what is your experience in helping people who've been through this in claiming their power back?
Well, first, making them believe it wasn't their fault. It's unbelievable how many women just don't. And that's why I started stretching the definition of what happened. Because I had one client, it was a lesbian, and she couldn't be intimate with her partner.
Yeah.
And it went back, and again, it was a therapist that told her it couldn't have anything to do with the fact that your father tried kissing you when your mother was at the hairdresser and you came home from school. Why do they always want to say it doesn't have anything to do with that?
Yeah.
And then that goes in your head. Of course it did. At one moment in time changes everything for a person.
Yeah.
If a father goes to kiss you, whether he's drunk and wants to say, oh, let's not talk about that. I wasn't in my right mind. It doesn't matter. To a child's development, it changes everything. It has crossed boundaries.
Exactly.
If a father can do it, why can't anyone do it?
Yeah.
Boundaries, big word.
And so it's when we're working with our clients, we really have to let them know it's no fault. I mean, and then there is the situations of incest where the wiring is then quite different, because, you know, another person could have reacted in a completely different way. Well, my daddy loves me. You know, he loves me. I can't feel bad about what he did to me.
Yeah. Again, isn't this amazing how often what we're doing is actually helping the victim to understand they were victimized.
Yeah.
Like the school teacher in New York, that wasn't right. Whatever you got out of it, whatever love you got out of it, that's not how a daddy loves a daughter.
Yeah.
A lot of education, really.
Yeah.
Therapy is like what you're talking about was an empowerment session that takes a whole room full of people to be
Yeah.
able to set up and
Yeah.
have. So on a one-to-one, one-on-one client
Yeah.
session, you can't do all that. It has to all be in the mind, or, I
Yeah.
am strong enough to hold a pillow over someone a little bit,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
at their feet too, so the feet can kick. That's another way of discharging. And
Exactly.
kicking them out,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
put a pillow there. But a lot of it is education.
Yeah.
You have to get them to even understand. And for that, we have techniques too. We sometimes
Yeah.
have to talk about if it happened to someone else, if they saw it happen to their daughter, that,
Yeah.
realizing how little they were at that age, because we don't remember
Yeah.
the powers. So if they have now a daughter who has been the age that they are, often it comes up when a child is their age, and stuff starts rising in them to come out because, they've
Yeah.
been so good at suppressing it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, what we're talking about can be quite triggering for people. And, I want, people to know that they can reach out, because, you've been doing this for 4 decades or more. Is that? Yeah.
It's exactly 40 years in 20.
Exactly now. Wow.
Now I can finally say, really, 40 years.
40 years now. And you're based in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yes, but I've been doing Skype
Yeah.
sessions. It could be Zoom, could be Skype,
Yeah.
could be FaceTime. WhatsApp. I've been doing them since about 2015. So
Yeah.
I'm really available to anyone in the world.
Fantastic. And your website, remind me of your website address.
You can get to it by debbieunterman.com. I have lots of other URLs that'll get to it. You can Google me. And then I also have my book that'll be backwards now, but it's called Talking to Myself.
Yeah.
Learning to love the voices in your head. And it's a self-help book. It's a good place for anybody to start.
It
Not
really,
just
it's a kind of based on subpersonality theory.
Yes.
We call it conference room. Yeah.
Yeah. And I call it love the voices. Learn to love them. Everyone wants you to just get rid of that wounded child, get rid of that critic. No, we got to really get them up to date. Love them. And if they're not from us, then we kick them out.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining me today, Debbie. It's been a real treat.